happy birthday to Oregon, 167th, and 250th for the United States this year, a little bit later on. So, I'm Roger Nichols, and thank you for coming to what is the recently renamed Berkuterin Regional History Forum Series. Carl Berkuterin was the one who stood in this place for 40 years and introduced these. And he wasn't just helpful to the original Boston County Courthouse. He was involved heavily with the Kiwanis, with Cascade Singers, and probably with a whole bunch of others in addition to the Congregational Church that he taught for 31 years. So he will definitely be missed. We will try to live up to his legacy. Well, before we introduce our awesome presenters today, we have some housekeeping measures to take care of. And they include the obligatory cell phone turn it off before you bother people today. We all forget that. Oh, I better do the same. Okay, also we have a couple of things today. You have saw the drawings today. We have drawings for some goodies, including that. And we'll also have, I'm also going to throw in a 400-year-old Indian coin from 1600. No, so we will have that as well. Now, this is for today, and then every ticket today gets entered into the big drawing for the last one, which will be March 7th, which will be for this big gift basket you saw downstairs, and the treasure chest that I put in with two 135-year-old silver dollars in it. So it's about $175 value. Oh, and you're an instant millionaire because there's a $50 million bill, genuine. Unfortunately, not U.S. dollars. That's from Zimbabwe in 2008 when they had massive inflation. And just for fun, also from the inflation times post-World War I in Germany, there's a 10 million mark note in there as well. So have some fun with that. Also, we wanted to say that I'm very pleased to have finished up a long process of digitizing all 165 audio tapes. And I have these down, so they're all going to be available for sale. This is from all back, way back to the 70s. And we have, I'd say, 165 of them. And we'll sell them to you. We'll put them on a thumb drive for you for $5 for a thumb drive. It's $5 for each story, except we give a discount for quantity. So the more you buy, the cheaper they are. If you want to buy all 165 programs, it's $1 a piece. Do the whole thing. So that's a great bargain, and we think it'll help everybody to understand more about history. There's some amazing people that no longer are with us that did these programs. So you can sign up downstairs. You can mark off. I've got a place for you to check out what you want and leave it with us, and then we will have it ready for you next time we come. So that having been said, today we have a real treat for you, which you can see already. David and Kristen and Benko have brought a real gem to the Dalles. In fact, introduced a whole new destination for travelers here, and are getting ready to introduce a second one. So we're delighted. I was very lucky enough to be in the audience recording on the Dalles City Council meeting when they decided this was the proper people to have the Oaks Lodge, and took what was running down and getting into trouble, and took a liability from the city and turned it not only to a positive, but a genuine positive. So we're absolutely delighted. We might as well call them Mr. and Mrs. Neon Signs, because they go back a long way with this. With the first National Sign Museum in all places in Thomas, Washington, and then we're involved with the other National Sign Museum back in, let's see, in my notes here, American Sign Museum in Cincinnati, and then helped the Las Vegas Museum gather all those signs in that boneyard that's been featured in I don't know how many television and movie shows. It's a wonderful place. So now they've got it here. And I am so delighted. The first time I went through there, I learned so much. The other 3 or 4 times I came through with other relatives, I kept learning more. It's an amazing place. I've done multiple times. So I'm really excited to share the news that they have came the Jantzen Beach Carousel, as you can see, and that'll be adding another attraction. Very pleased. Please make a warm welcome for David and Kristen Benko.
Thank you. Restore Oregon had went through when they ended up with the carousel, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But kind of long story short, really it was your town historians who gave us the inspiration to even want to do this, because we know that you guys have a strong community of people who care about history, care about, people and places and objects. And so I just wanted you guys to know that that was very inspirational to us in even deciding that we would take this on as a separate project under the National Neon Sign Museum. So the carousel also was built in 1921 originally, and that is the same year that neon came into having a patent, so there's kind of a connection there. Yeah.
One of the things I'll even add just really quick is that, first, to reiterate what Kristen said, this would not have been possible without the community here in the Dalles. I think the thing that was meaningful to us, though, is that we've been unanimously selected by Oregon Historical Society. So I think that was affirming not only what we were trying to do, but the community that we have here in the Dalles. So truly, again, thank you to everybody.
So, just wanted to address the pavilion, and then we'll talk more about the horses. So, a lot of people have asked, where will a pavilion go? And there's been a lot of different ideas. At one point, it was brought up to us that there was a lot, 1 Street North, which we did put a proposal in because they had asked if that was something we might be interested in. And part of the agreement with Restore Oregon was that we would have a pavilion to house the carousel as an object that's a number of years old. So currently the pavilion is going to go on the property next to the museum. It'll have 3 floors. There's a lower floor, and that houses a lot of the mechanical and the allowance to get underneath the carousel. So the carousel actually goes up a level on the 2nd floor, and then the 3rd floor has an event center and activity center. But it's going to be a state-of-the-art space for exhibits, and not just the carousel, but for other art exhibits and other events that might happen in the community. Our team right now, we have 28 horses that we're hoping to have restored completely by the end of 2026. So altogether there's 82 horses. They're in rows of 4, and they're all themed rows. And so there's a lot that goes into each horse. They have to be completely stripped down to the wood and examined, and then we do all the woodwork, which I'll get into, and the priming, and then the painting, and then the detail work. This is a really great community project. It's something that we've started to do some work with the community college to involve students, not just in our community, but also in other Oregon communities. We've had a number of student volunteers who participated just in little ways, which is helping them with their STEM involvement in their own schools. So, history of the carousel. So the carousel was originally created in 1921 at C.W. Parker, Abilene, Kansas. And it was at the pier at Venice, California for a very short time. And we've heard a variety of reasons why it left there. One was a fire, other was unpayment of financing on the carousel. Whichever happened, the carousel came down. And it's at that point that the band organ was no longer traveling with the carousel. They don't actually know it's not necessarily generated specifically for the carousel. It's really about the economic benefit that comes when people decide to go eat, or they stop for gas, or they want to go spend the night, or visit other museums in town, such as the Courthouse Museum. That is where that number comes from. So this picture right here is great. This is actually at the factory, C.W. Parker's factory. And you can see these men are just out there with sawhorses, and they're repairing the carousel, which, as we've worked with the conservators, we found a little amusing because we're trying to be so gentle and careful with each one, yet they were just out there, and this is often probably how it really happened, even when it was at Jantzen Beach. The restoration process of you need to fix a leg. They had multiple leg pieces they could put back on the horse. Same with the painting, you need to get it painted. It was all about getting it back operational to right again. So as I mentioned, there are 72 of these horses. So far, we have 4 rows. We started a campaign called Revive the Ride, which I talk about a little bit more in this book if people are interested in volunteering. And that was funded through Oregon Cultural Trust. They helped us kind of kickstart this. After we got the carousel, David went to the East Coast and visited about 30 carousels for the 50th carousel anniversary, and really talked to them about what did you do right, what did you do wrong. We didn't want to make mistakes. So that whole first year for us was doing research and looking through what Restore Oregon had provided us, details about what they did with the sample horse. And in his visits, the most important thing they really stressed was you have to really focus on your volunteer team and making sure that your training for the volunteers is consistent and that you have a program for that. And Oregon Cultural Trust, that was really what that helped us do with our first 12 horses, because David, and we had never restored a carousel. He's restored lots of signs, but this is a community project, and it's been about training people from the ground up. How do you restore a carousel horse? So when people come to the museum and they want to volunteer, we do a workshop and we walk them through each phase, and then you get started hands-on, and we start from the bottom to the top of restoring a horse. So that's how we're learning together. So anyone can do it because we didn't know how either. A couple other things here, 82 horses, 1 unforgettable carousel. So like I said, the National Neon Sign Museum projects to have 28 horses, 7 family rows of 4, completed by the end of 2026. And that's going to be our initial installation. The 12 that were our Kickstarter, and then the remainder of those rows that makes the 28 horses altogether. So as you can see down there, that darker color on the bottom of the chart is showing you the number that we would have painted in 2027, or by the beginning of 2027, which is our 28 horses. And then sanding, we tend to have more in production on the sanding end because that takes a long time. You can talk to any of these wonderful people in the room that have been sanding away, and it's hundreds of hours of sanding and repair for each horse. And then the gray, that is telling you how many that we will have stripped down, which we will have a full number stripped down by the end of this year, and we'll talk about that in a second.
And something that I'll even add is that this is an active process. So just because we're painting horses doesn't mean that we're not sanding, and just because we're not sanding doesn't mean that we're not stripping. So really over the next 4 years, we have a production going on. Right now we have our lower level facility at the museum open where we have volunteers working. So really I think throughout the next year, we're going to continue to be growing that production process, which Kristen, of course, will talk about more.
So each of these horses, once we have all the old paint removed, goes through a process of inspection. Lots and lots of repairs have been done to these horses over the years. So we inspect each one, make sure if there's any legs or tails, any pieces that need to be re-glued and repaired or redoweled, that's happening. do have, you know, incidental damage and bigger damage all over them that needs to be restored. And so we're using different hardeners and epoxies to fill those places. And after probably 200 to 500 hours of sanding on each one, then they're ready for primer. So, yeah. The other thing that's very labor intensive is the removal of the gems. We found that David is the master at that. So he's been tasked with gem removal. And the other interesting note is the horse that's on the inside has the gems, or it should have gems on both sides. It's their romance side that has the gems. That's what it's called. So the inside one generally would have it on both sides, because if the carousel had the mirrors in the center, you would see those jewels from both sides. So as we went through this process, we have a number for each horse that was provided to us from Restore Oregon. And that was based on the work that they did with Barbara to identify, you know, what row should each of these horses be placed in? What family is it supposed to go in? So as we've started to strip them down, we have found that there are a lot of horses who maybe had jewel holes that were covered up because they actually were a horse that at one time belonged on the center, and maybe it got moved out a row. So we're working to correct all those little things that maybe will bring it closer to how it actually originally was in the 20s.
Something else that I'll even add in is that one of the biggest parts of this was inspection. The first few years of the process for us was research, in addition to what Restore Oregon had done. Because when they had done the restoration in the 90s, there was not a lot of documentation that went into these horses. So something we were trying to figure out is, you know, how do you go about this the correct way? Which horses go with which families? So it really was a time-intensive thing just to make sure that we were doing this the proper way.
Yes, and we're making a historical document for each horse. So it'll be a living document that whoever becomes the caretakers after us, they will have a book for each and every horse that describes what was done on the horse, what was the damage on the horse, which paint colors were selected, why they were selected, and so on. So that obviously would have been a huge help for us, but since it's not, we're just spending a little bit more time on the front end doing research into the paint layers that are below when we have found those. So sanding, there's a nice picture of two gentlemen who I'm sure you know. They have spent lots of hours downstairs sanding, and it really is a project and community involvement that has brought a lot of people together. We have volunteers that come Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, generally from 10 to 1 or 1 to 4, and they come and they work together as a team. People come sometimes all those hours and days, or sometimes they pop in once a week or once a month if they're coming from Bend or somewhere further. So I kind of already talked about the wood repair. You can see in this image right here, these horses have a lot of places that needs to be repaired, and this is where it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys doing kind of, I don't want to say methodical work, but things that maybe you can just kind of think in your mind a little bit more. And that's why I said it really reminds me more of like ceramics and pottery, when you're just really focused on a detail. And a lot of people, this is the process we start in, is the sanding and the wood fill, learning how to do that. Some people have moved up to the painting and they decide they don't want to do that anymore. They want to go back to sanding. So people gravitate to their own liking in the restoration process. So next we have the painting and the block painting. So once we actually get the horse sanded and all the wood fill and repair done, it has 3 coats of primer on it, which is again is sanded. And then we do the training workshops on the different treatments for the body. So we start with the base coats and teaching how do you block print, or block paint, sorry. How do you take large out to the community. We've had many different school groups that have come in, and our volunteers have participated in those experiences where a group will come in and they'll do the tour of the Neon Museum, and we talk about restoration and how that relates to the sign industry, and they end up in the ballroom, where often we'll have our volunteers who are up there, and they'll do a mini lesson for the kids and then let them come and participate in having a hands-on experience with one of the horses who's probably in the primer stage. And so they're getting to help, put on some of the block painting, which is thrilling for them to think that, wow, I got to actually help paint one of the carousel horses. So each of our horses has a original picture of the last known paint job, probably from the 90s. And then we had an intern who went through and meticulously did line drawings for every single horse that we have. She was an intern from Hillsborough, and her parents got involved, and then she decided that she wanted to get involved. And so she actually did this for school credit and was able to help us out. So now we have line drawings for every single horse. So once we get to that, and we have a sample you can see up on the left that shows the colors that were used on the last painting, then we come up with a palette that will be used in that new row of horses based on existing colors and different historical documents. So from that point, we take our line drawings and we come up with two different versions, usually, of what would that horse potentially have looked like based on what we know and just some of the other colors that were available. So what is next? We are getting ready to launch a campaign for the horses. It's going to be our kickstart. We just had an advisory meeting. And Carolyn Wood is magic, because as soon as we had our meeting about finances and talking about all the amazing people in this community who have donated so far to this project, we received the next day in the mail a very large donation, which was exciting because that will help us take care of getting a lot of the planning that needs to be done for the carousel, as well as the restoration work. So on this, in 2026, you'll see the red represents community and donors, and the white is grants and major funding. Simon's other job is development, which he's actively pursuing grants for education and grants for the groundbreaking on the pavilion.
One of the things that I'll talk about with our current campaign is that we're doing the Name a Horse campaign. Even this lovely horse that is here today has no name, so if you want to walk away today having a name for this horse, we gladly welcome that opportunity. We're going to have 3 different price points for these horses, which depends on A, the size of the horse, but B, its background. If I'm not mistaken, a horse like this would be $15,000. We have $20,000 horses, and we have $25,000 horses. This is traditional to what other carousels have fundraised traditionally. So that's just something for you guys to consider as we move forward into the next year. And this fundraiser, of course, plays into some of the campaign that we are projecting for our project.
So primarily the horses at any carousel have been used for the fundraising of the pavilion, because people are very excited about having a horse that their family names, and less excited about maybe building a pavilion, which you can't have the carousel if you don't have the pavilion. So traditionally, most carousels use the 40 to 80 horses as their base to start building the carousel pavilion. In 2026, the National Neon Sign Museum began our kickoff capital campaign for the restoration of the historic Jantzen Beach Carousel. In January, we received our first major gift, adding over $100,000 of the approximate $8 million that we are projected needing for the carousel pavilion. So this year, our team is seeking to raise $500,000 via community and donor funding, and an additional $2.5 million via grants. So we feel very confident about this. There's a lot of people that are very excited about the Jantzen Beach Carousel, and a lot of people have expressed to us, how can you be so inspirational about it? And, you got to go where the doors open, and we weren't expecting to get a carousel, and I think that you have to trust that it was meant to be in the Dalles, and so we just move one step at a time, and we're just going to keep restoring horses and moving forward. I already talked about our
generations, but something that is educational and meaningful for future students, future generations, future learners, future individuals in general.
So, as we mentioned before, the carousels are economic benefit to the community, adding signature family attractions that align with city tourism and revitalization goals, becoming essential community anchors. So, one thing that we thought about with the mural fest that sort of preceded all of this was communities that have art have less crime, more positive visitation, and better community health among the people who actually live there. That's proven research that you can go back and look at, that the people who live in artistic communities tend to be healthier communities individually. And so, like with the murals, this is something that we're hoping that many more of you become involved with. If you have the opportunity, once a month we show the Ride movie that was part of Albany's restoration process, and that is very inspirational. If you want to come and watch that with us sometime, and it just tells a story about how they brought a carousel to their community, worked on it, they did for 20 years because they had to rebuild every single horse. They didn't have animals. And I think that if you have not been inspired about carousels before, that would certainly inspire you about carousels in our community.
Something that I'll talk about as well, the graph that we have on the left side, that top line is the statistics from the Oregon Department of Transportation. They've estimated that about 9 million cars pass by or travel either into or beyond the Dalles every single year. 7.2 million of those are being individuals that do not stop in the Dalles, which I think is a significant portion of economic consumers that we could be reaching in the future. And then about 1.8 million that do stop in the Dalles. So something that we've talked about is that sort of before the carousel, sort of that fiscal year 0, before the carousel's finished, fiscal year 1 where it's open to the public and accessible, and then really 10 years beyond, what are our plans as a museum for how we're impacting the community? And again, I think it comes back to creating something that is accessible, not only for the community, but for the public. One of the things that I often ask when visitors come to our Neon Museum, we've had visitors from all 50 states now, is, why are you here today? And one of the most commonly answered questions is like, oh, well, I'm in the Dalles for the Neon Museum. And I think trying to, again, not only bring people to the Neon Museum and the carousel, but it's bringing people to the Dalles, Oregon. And as we talked about, we've estimated, based on other really statistics of what other carousels have brought into communities, that we're looking at about $1.5 million per month that would be brought into this community from the carousel. And that's just with the initial opening. If you actually look at the historic figures that something like Jantzen Beach Carousel made at its peak, it was bringing about $750,000, and I think that was back in the 70s. So you're talking almost 80, 60 years later. We're hoping to bring significantly more than that number into the Dalles.
So, a community asset. So the legacy of the Jantzen Beach Carousel belongs to the Dalles. This is not only just an Oregon State treasure, this is a national treasure. So I think it's very exciting that this community was selected so that we can get all the horses done by 2028, which would be the 100-year birthday of the carousel being in Oregon itself. And then that will increase our advisory team to 30. So if you have an interest in getting involved, these books are the books that I go through when we do our workshop. And it gives you a little bit of background about what it means to be a volunteer at the museum, and that the carousel is an object of the museum, so we pull it under that fold. But if you have an interest, because you're organized and like historical projects, we would love to have you on our advisory team. So that's a consideration.
And as we've already said, this would not be possible without the community, both bringing this carousel here, but making it possible to the public. We have all kinds of opportunities available at the museum, so if you think that you have something to offer, we're here for that. So don't think, oh, well, I can't pick. Great, we'll find somewhere else that you can fit in. So we appreciate the support that this community has had for us. And if you have any talent, skill, or trade, even if it's just sitting at our front desk and greeting people, we appreciate that more than you can imagine.
And also, can you go back?
Absolutely.
So that picture right there, that was in a larger picture of all the horses. So currently, all of the horses that we're not working on are in storage. And they are racked up too high in a space that is about the size of this room, along with the carousel mechanism. So it's not a tremendous amount of space that all of that is taking up right now. And our hope is that we would like to get all of it moved out here. So as Simon mentioned, our volunteer opportunities are for artisans and craftsmen. If you enjoy woodworking, repair, or graphic design, you want to work on promotions and media, we would welcome that. Site support. We have a lot of people who come in when we have these school groups. Carolyn Wood comes often, and she's been a huge help when we've had school groups come in, sharing with the kids. And some of you I know are teachers or been teachers, but even if you haven't been, and enjoy kids of all ages. It's really exciting, and kids are very excited when they are at the museum. They're so respectful, and I feel well behaved. That it's been one of the joys, honestly, of this project, is just having young people come in and participating with what we're doing, and seeing like lost trades and arts that many of you know how to do, but they've never had the opportunity to do.
Something I'll even add, I know I just said a moment ago about the different opportunities we have. If you guys think back to the Wall Dogs Festival that we had in 2022, everyone was involved with that, right? There were people that have never picked up a paintbrush before. And I think in the same way, we have all kinds of workshops going on at the museum right now. I just did a photography workshop teaching volunteers how to do different kinds of photography. We've had all kinds of paint workshops, so even if you think, oh, well, I can't paint, everyone can pick up a paintbrush for the most part, I think. So, again, we gladly welcome you to have the opportunity of doing that.
So our financial needs, they've been taken care of one step at a time. So we've been very grateful for everybody who's participated in that. A very base level way, people very exciting too, just to hear how his son got involved after C.W. Parker and kind of took on the legacy and did a number of other things besides repairing carousels.
Yeah, as Kristen was saying, we are putting together educational exhibits. Of course, we're a neon museum, but we are an educational museum. And as we continue to expand with projects like the carousel, we are working on putting together exhibits. We just recently acquired, as Kristen said, a whole bunch of documents relating to his son. I mean, that included things like original sketches, his son's passport, and all kinds of other random memorabilia. So we're continuing to expand, our collection to tell a more broad and whole story.
So that's all I have, and I would be welcome to answer any questions that you have.
As would I and David sitting in the chairs.
Is that an ear of corn on the back of the saddle?
So the question was that a ear of corn on the back of the saddle? Yes, it is. So a lot of the horses, like we said, they're very thematic. Some have holsters, some have horn, some have, the pelts from the rabbits or the other wild animals. So each one has a different design. So like I said, they're in rows, 4 deep, and each row is thematic. So that's been a lot of fun as we've, started to look at these and identify, where the actual rows were placed, as they all have little details like that. There's one that have the flowing looped manes and corn, kind of the corn holder manes.
So when you think about it, that in that era, it wasn't just a given that you could go to the grocery store and get food. So what they usually had on them were things that were important to them, and so as something as we might think like, it's just corn, right? I mean, that was a really big deal. So they're all that way, and that's really kind of fascinating.
It really is this beautiful representation of American history when you start looking at each and every horse. Yes.
Is the Carousel Horse Museum still open in Littleton, Washington?
They set it up
Yes.
only one weekend a year is what I understand. Is one weekend a year it's like up for like a week, and then okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the question was, is the Bickleton Museum open? We had heard that traditionally it was open one time a year, and they would set it up for a festival, although I don't know if that continues to be true.
Well, you can also, at least in the past, I used to live in Goldenville, and we could call them up and make it private. The senior center has brought.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the senior center
Groups
sounds
there,
like has
yeah.
brought people out there, or you can call them up and they'll do a private showing. Yeah, great.
The horses are in the museum,
Yeah.
and they're on the wall.
Yeah.
Right? We could go there.
We have heard that the museum has not been open recently. I don't know if, I have not called them, but I've heard that it is not, or was seasonally maybe closed,
Probably for the winter.
maybe. Yep.
Open by appointment, so anytime when we went, it was open by.
Yeah, what?
Carolyn and others are saying it's, the Bickleton Museum is open by appointment, and you can call them.
But the carousel mechanics, at least they explained to us, are out wherever the rodeo ground is. And they even have a special trailer, they haul the horses in, out and set them on it for about 3 or 4 days that and then it operates. And they were telling us that there's like 5 generations of people who have all used that, because they got it in about 1923, I think. And it looked to me like it was probably when they were going to this kind of carousel, bigger, more mechanical, that they told us they thought theirs came from Oaks Park in Portland.
Okay. Well, and just as a frame of reference, if you can go back to that picture of
Which one?
this that was fun. But the the C.W. Parker carousel we have is 65 feet across and over 30 feet tall. So it is one of the 2 largest, and now we've heard it is the largest that's going to be operational in the United States. mostly poplar wood that is used, for the horses. And there are some replacement pieces, that we did get with the carousel extra legs. We haven't had to use them so far, but there's been some pretty significant repairs on the horses as we've taken the paint off. You know, once you get the paint off, you start realizing all the different ways they try to repair it with metal plates and nails and dowels. Probably whatever they could do quickly would be my guess.
Some of these horses were a little bit Frankensteined together from what we heard, because these horses were made in manufacturing facilities. You know, maybe they'd have 4 kinds of heads, 4 kinds of, so on and so forth. We even have a horse downstairs right now where it's a big horse, and the volunteers are like, that has little baby horse legs, should we replace those? And so, it's just one of those things. It's like, well, again, it's just they Frankenstein pieces together as they could, and I think part of that was just time saving.
Does he have his shoes on? I thought it was fascinating that they all have horseshoes.
Yeah,
They
no.
don't have shoes.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question was, does this horse have horseshoes? Ours actually all do have the stamped C.W. Parker horseshoes, most of them. And so we pull them off when we do the stripping of them, and it will get it shoes after we do the clear coat. So we're waiting to do the clear coat all at one time, and the gems on these will get done in families. So that's kind of our next step with that. Yes.
So for a time, there was some sort of carousel museum in Red River. Do you remember that project?
Yes.
It was in the old bank building. So what happened with that?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
for time, there were some horses being restored.
Yeah.
It was the original First National Bank building
Yeah.
down in the river.
Yeah, so the question was, what happened to the carousel at the river, or the carousel horses? So those were owned, those were owned by the Perrin family and then passed on to the son. And at one point, we did hear that potentially he was moving. I don't think he is, but he has a lot of horses that are not C.W. Parker horses. They're other, types of carousel horses. And it is a large collection of horses that are not currently being restored. And also the museum, I believe, is not operational, or, it's not open where it used to be housed. There was a question in the back. Yeah.
My name is Linda Wilson, and I've been a volunteer since April, last April. And these horses are really remarkable. And I just wanted to add, she's talking about the horseshoes. Every one of them is stamped, they're all made in Leavenworth, Kansas. And every horseshoe is stamped with a number 11, Worth, Kansas, which are just really unique and I thought it was just, yeah. And the one picture of the horse with the,
With the green emblem.
yep,
Right there, river.
yep. This one right here, underneath the saddle, there's a rosette, and then there's some little stuff that's in yellow and green. And when we started on this, this must have been a very popular horse because that was rubbed smooth. And it was just through old pictures that we found, and we started building up all of that to make it so it actually stands out. You can put the gem back in there. So, a lot of them are just extremely interesting. The one up here that Kristen is standing by, in front of the saddle, in front of the flag there, there's, we took it to be part of the saddle because it looks, it's brown. It wasn't brown then, but that's the way an English saddle, flat saddle is. But if you look on it, it has cross hatchings on it, just like the blanket. It has the blue blanket behind it. So whether the original carvers, that was part of that blue blanket, it's kind of judgment calls that you have to make as you find the color.
Yeah, so any of you that are interested in volunteering, you're in good company because the team that's been working since this last spring, they were the trial run. We've all mistakes, and we've all had to sand paint off, repaint over, learn new techniques, so it's been a lot of fun. Yes.
What are the museum hours for visitors?
So currently, question is, what are the museum hours? During the winter until April 1st, it is Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 10 to 5 for the general public. And then if members want to come in or have a special group, they can call us if they're bringing a special group. April 1st, it goes through Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 5. Yeah. So the volunteers are coming on one day of the week where we're not open to the public, Tuesday, currently. Any other questions?
I might have missed it at the beginning, I'm sorry, I was a little bit late. One, I just think this is a fabulous, magical thing to be happening in the house. And two, is it going to be in the parking lot next to the museum? Is that, because I heard different things over the
Yeah,
years.
so addressing the question of where's the pavilion gonna go? So one of the agreements with Restore Oregon was it had to go in a pavilion. So the lot that's next door is part of the museum property, and so the pavilion will go there. And that's currently our plan. We have looked at other places around town, but I think that we've come back to that's where it's gonna go in a pavilion.
So it's going to be enclosed?
It will be
Yes, it will
enclosed,
be
yeah.
enclosed.
Yeah, it'll be totally enclosed.
Okay,
Yeah.
like the one in Albany?
Yes.
How does it compare to the, like I've been to the one, in Missoula? How does it compare to the one in Missoula? How many horses?
It is
It's
going to
been
be
a couple years.
72 horses that are on display, and then we'll have 10 that are not on the carousel that were traditionally, they were backup horses. I think we're going to take some of those horses and use them for educational purposes. I mean, we've been careful about how much we've talked about this, but even some of the horses, for example, have the Indian peace sign, which we know now is a swastika, which is the reversed image, but we've talked about taking some of those horses, instead of just getting them off display, forgetting about them, actually using those for educational purposes. So there'll be 72 horses, it's 4 rows. It is going to now be the largest operational carousel in the United States, so it's,
Do you know how
it's
many
big.
ones in, the one in Missoula has?
Not off the top of my
I
head.
think that one is like 40 some on
Yeah.
it. And even to get ours operational, it is possible to start the carousel with fewer horses on it and
Yep.
add to it. It's all about balance. So, you know, you could start with half the horses if you needed to. That would be possible. That's not our goal. Our goal is to get them all done, but if we needed to, we could start with fewer.
And we have, I don't know if it's a lot, I've been several carousels. Will it have like the music, the organ,
The band
that's
organ.
like part of
Yeah.
the magic, I think.
It is, and so the band organ that went with this one when it was in California, when it got moved to Oregon, it went missing. So there wasn't a record of what happened, if it stayed there, if who knows what happened to it. But our intention is to get a band organ similar to the one that was on the Twin. So this used to have an operational carousel on the East Coast that was similar in size. And so we have pictures of that band organ, which is what we plan to do, is have a band organ. Yeah.
Jantzen did have one twin carousel that was pretty close to being identical. That one's no longer on display. And then there's a few smaller, I think 2 and 3 row C.W. Parker carousels. So there is a precedent for what other band organs and what other carousels are like. So I think as we go towards that restoration phase, and even when we've been doing some of our fundraising last year at the Cherry Festival, we talked about trying to figure out band organs. So that is one of our priorities as a carousel in progress.
Yeah. Up on the top of the carousel, you'll see all the detail, the little cherubs that go around it. Each of those sections is probably about 10 foot. That is a whole nother painting and restoration piece if people want to get involved with that. Maybe you're like, I don't want to paint a horse. Well, you know what? Pieces that go along the top were originally like cream and gold and silver, and then it was the light bulbs that created the illumination as it spun around. You'll see a sample halfway point between what Jantzen Beach had painted it in and what it's supposed to be. So the crest piece is supposed to be like an off-white, gold, silver, and then Jantzen Beach went to evergreen, bright red, and some gold, like yellow. And so when Restore Oregon did a sample of that piece, what they tried to do was kind of meet it in the middle and say, okay, well, if we don't go all the way back to the original, what could we do? So we do have a sample upstairs in the ballroom that shows the crest part, and it's kind of like a very pale sage, cream, gold, and silver. So if anyone is interested in maybe something like that, maybe you like doing arts and crafts, that has a lot less detail in it, and maybe offers more opportunities for people that don't feel comfortable, tackling a horse. So
Something that I'll add, with even the Elks Lodge, for example, when we restored that building, there had been 3 owners after the original Elks were in the building. So you had 3 levels of drop ceilings, 3 levels of sheetrock. So when we came there were ceilings that were caving in, floors that were torn up, walls that were crumbling. And I remember hearing the stories that hundreds and hundreds of people, they'd come in the front door, and thank you very much, and they would leave. And, when we came there, I remember, my dad came in and said, oh, this is perfect, here's going to be the theater, here's going to be this gallery, here's going to be that gallery. And we took over 500,000 pounds of garbage and waste out of the building, taking everything back to the original structure of what the Elks Lodge building was. And I think in the same way with the carousel, we're sort of asking that question. How do we not only honor this for a new generation, but how do we keep this historically accurate? So one of the things we've been doing is trying to find those historic colors, trying to find the historic colors for the cherubims and everything else that goes around the carousel. So we've been trying to keep it, historically accurate to the 1920s of what this carousel used to be, but in a way that is fresh and modern for a new generation.
yeah, and the mechanical pieces of the carousel are in good condition.
Yes.
So compared to other places like Albany that had to, that's all Albany was given was the mechanism. They were not given animals when they decided to take on a carousel in their community. Each and every one of their animals is brand new carved.
Or fantasy.
More like fantasy pieces. And so we're very fortunate that we actually do have the mechanism. It's in reasonably good shape. But moving forward, once the pavilion plans are, approved, that is really when we can start thinking about the assembly of the actual mechanism. Albany put theirs together 3 times before they ever got the horses on it. So if any of you know somebody with a very large building, 30 feet tall and at least 60 feet wide, that's what Albany did. They put the whole thing together, and that's how they started working on the mechanics of it. So whether that happens in the pavilion that we're building or happens somewhere else, we'd really love to start bringing that out here, make that another educational opportunity for people who are interested in, electrical and mechanical.
And the Missoula Carousel has 38 horses, and the Jantzen Beach 82. A little bit bigger.
So thank you for letting us present.
More housekeeping stuff. I forgot to do this because I was so excited about having them here. But we don't charge for these admissions. We do pass the sock and ask